I'm Becky Fawcett, a mom by adoption, an infertile blonde, a female founder. I'm going to change this a little because I hate it when the intro is the same every single time. I'm a problem solver and a fierce advocate for change within the adoption community and beyond. Podcast rulebooks say your introduction must always be the same. I just showed you it is not going to be the same with me. And for most of my life, I tried to be perfect and to do what everyone else was doing. And then I tried to have children. That was my plot twist. Now I look for any opportunity to be different. I'm an outspoken advocate who wants to change the world, and this frequently gets me into trouble. But for the most part, it helps me make real connections with real people. Welcome to my podcast, The Fawcett Report. I'm so glad you're here. And today's guest is, seriously, in 18 years of Help Us Adopt, one of the most exciting people I was introduced to, because as you're going to see on this podcast, she's pretty incredible. Her name is Bridgette Mayer, and she has an art gallery in Philadelphia and does work across the United States with all her artists and collectors. And the thing about her is that she wrote this book called The Art Cure, and her story didn't start that well. Bridgette, welcome to the podcast, and I'm so glad you're here.
Becky, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your conversation and your podcast. I love the work you're doing with Help Us Adopt and the transformations that you're making in families' lives through the resources you're providing. So I'm really excited to share my story with you and your audience today.
It's amazing. So I will now tell everybody, you're listening to an adoptee, but you're not listening to an adoptee with what you would probably think is a typical story. And Bridgette, I would love you to tell everybody a little bit about your story of origin, really, I guess, and how you grew up and the basis of this book. I read this years ago when we first met, and I reread it in advance of today's podcast. It's so brave and so real. And I love that you were brave enough to share this with the world, because you wouldn't look at you and think that this is how you grew up.
So I wrote a book that came out in 2017 called The Art Cure. And if anyone's curious, it's really my entire story of origin, starting from my birth in Jersey City, New Jersey, and then through making it to college and then getting into the arts, and then carrying that story until when I opened my gallery in Philadelphia in 2001. And I wasn't sure I wanted to share the story, but I felt compelled to share it because I knew that there were artists out there struggling and are struggling professionally that don't think they can make it in the art world. There are young women that are looking for mentorship in whatever form they can find it, whether a book or a coach. So that compelled me. And I just felt that if I'm able to get the story out on paper, share it with the world, I could help at least one person. And that was kind of my guiding light in digging back through history that I had buried through years of just not wanting to think about it because it was so painful, wanting to be a normal kid growing up and doing the things that normal kids do. And then just knowing that I had this horrific childhood and that I wasn't a normal kid because of that out of the gate. The whole story is there. And as far as going back in time, I'll just give you a brief synopsis. I was born in Jersey City to an alcoholic, drug addicted mother. She had a lot of psychological and mental issues and turned to alcohol and drugs as a way to cope. She had 6 children with varying fathers. So we have several fathers. I never met my dad, as far as I remember. We grew up in a very poor part of Jersey City in a tenement building. It was essentially an empty apartment. I'll paint the picture. 2 rooms. One was her room with a mattress on the floor, and one room was where the kids slept. And there was one mattress on the floor, no sheets, no bedding for 6 kids. And that's where we slept every night in the same clothes we had on that day, that week, that month. So I wasn't showering. I wasn't changing my clothes. She often would leave us for a week or a few days. We just never knew. I think when you're young, you don't really know time and how to track time, but we just knew there'd be days when we would literally be barricaded in this apartment and we had water from the faucet and that's it. There was no food in the pantry. There's no nothing. I remember opening the refrigerator one day and it was just empty. Like picture you just moved in and bought a new fridge. This fridge was not new. It was old, but it was empty. The freezer had ice cubes in it. So we would suck on ice cubes to eat. That was our meal. And we had no toys. We had really nothing. So, this went on for a number of years. The neighbors would complain and know about. So DIFUS would show up and would take us all and then disperse us to foster homes. And so I was in foster care from when I was a baby until I was 7. So really the first 7 years of my life were a lot of turmoil, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. When she was home, usually recovering from a drug binge or drinking a lot, she'd be locked in her own room. And if we made a sound, she would come out. We would get beaten pretty severely with a broomstick. And that was her method to keep us under control. I'm laughing because I have 2 children and they're so vivacious and energetic. And the other day it just popped into my head. They're so expressive and they're the age I was when I was living in the environment of being told, do not say a word, go to your room and be quiet. And we were contained through the fear of being beaten. So eventually, DIFUS, we were a case at that point after multiple years of coming into their office. And I was put into a foster home of a woman, Elaine Mayer, who eventually adopted me and my 2 sisters. And we were driven probably an hour and a half outside of Jersey City to an area in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, that was pretty remote with a lot of farmland. And that started my chapter 2 of my life of the best part of my life.
It
And
really is amazing.
yeah, yeah,
I think if you're listening, you might be crying by now, or you have a stomach ache from what you're hearing. And the reason I wanted to have Bridgette on today and for her to tell her truth is because adoption isn't always this. But this is a lot of it. And adoption is such a necessity to the children and families that need it. And I don't want to paint a doomsday, but because yours has such a wonderful ending, and I know it's not that easy to write. It wasn't just from A to B,
no, it wasn't.
but I really do encourage all of you to buy the Art Cure. It's on Amazon because you just will read it from start to finish in one sitting. So make sure you have enough time. But I would like to go back before we talk about the next chapter of your life because it was something that I remember vividly. And then when I met you and you spoke at one of the helpusadopt.org events, you used this as a pivotal moment that maybe you didn't realize at the time was your pivotal moment, but you were home alone and you found one of your mother's lipsticks.
Yes. I was always looking for stuff to play with as a kid. And if you put a kid in a room, they're just going to look for things to do and play and explore. And there was really not much to explore. And one day I wandered into the bathroom and found a bag of makeup. And I didn't know what it was. I pulled it down and looked through it. I was like, there's lipstick. I didn't know what it was. Like, ooh, what is this? What is eyeshadow? All the things that women have in their makeup bag. And I remember I just knew go over and paint on the wall. And I literally started drawing with the lipsticks on the wall. Then I moved on to the mascara and the eyeshadows, and I just kept going until I probably used up every ounce of makeup in that bag. And I covered an entire dirty wall in this tenement apartment with basically what I called my makeup mural. In hindsight, I thought about that story, and my siblings were really scared for me. And they said, "You're going to get in big trouble. You know that." Eventually, my birth mother came home and I got beaten pretty badly. But my takeaway from that experience was it gave me hope that just the experience of making something and having this fun, creative experience in such a dark, abysmal setting lit some type of energy within me that gave me some hope. And I knew that there were things available that could be fun and interesting and creative. And sometimes I wonder if I didn't have that experience, would I have gone into the arts? But I remember just feeling this sense of expression and freedom and escape and excitement that I was actually doing something and making something. And that stayed with me forever. And still to this day, I'm creating and making things, whether it's for me or clients in my business. But that was a really important memory and experience for me at that time.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing part of the book to read it and to realize then what you do with your life now professionally. Okay, so we do not have enough time today. We're going to need a 3-hour podcast because to talk about you end up in this home with who becomes your mom. I know she was such an inspiration in so many ways to you. There's parts of the book where you are like any other normal teenager and you're not getting along with your mom, and she stood firm because that's it. Like I always say to people, like adoptees are still regular, normal people. They just have a different story. So you behaved just like any other teenage daughter.
I have to comment on my mom
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
my adopted my mom, who to me was my true mom. I believe in fate, destiny, and luck, all of it. And sitting in New Jersey was this amazing woman married to an amazing husband, and they had 3 boys, and they had a farm, and my dad's hobby was farming and having animals and making hay and all the cool things that some people do on farms, garden. My mom wanted a daughter. She always wanted a girl. And my mom loved animals. She loved kids. She loved people. And she was a community person. And basically decided, you know what? I'm not going to try to get pregnant again. It's likely I'll have another boy. So I'm going to start fostering kids and bringing them into our home. They had 6 sheepdogs. She was into breeding sheepdogs at one point, and that was her way of, I think, fulfilling her desire to have a daughter. So she started fostering kids, and it would be short visits. And then we came on her radar and came into her home, and she fell in love with us. It was me and my younger sister. And I'm always grateful for the parents out there, whether they have children. I just met someone that has kids that also adopted several kids. And I thought, God, isn't that amazing? Like you have a family and you're adding to your family by bringing adoptees into your home. And how about these moms that, because really, most families, the mom is the foundation for the kids. And I don't think moms get recognized enough, whether you haven't adopted or you have. And she was very important to me. And my mom was kind of a force of nature. I was just telling a client that she did things and then she did them with conviction, and she was always guided that this is the right thing to do. And then she would tell my dad and get just kind of not get permission, but let him know. And I think the minute we met her, she knew in her mind we weren't going anywhere. She was going to be our mom and take care of us. And the more she learned about her story, the more committed she became. The first year I was with the Mayer family, I had not gone to school before. And I was about to turn 7. And, the first thing was to get rid of the lice in my hair that I came with. Believe it or not, that was a big project, and clean me up. I looked like a homeless kid. I essentially was. And then the second thing was get me enrolled in school. And I'd never gone to school before. So I have a son who is 6. He's about to turn 7. And that's the age I was. And
Do you think that's going to be a hard birthday for you? I'm now totally shifting gears, but I wasn't expecting you to say that. I
no, I'm
mean,
so proud of him. I'm so excited.
But I mean, for you, do you think when he turns 7, there's going to be that? I don't know. It's like when I have a friend whose mother died early on in her life. And when my friend turned that 40 something, she said that was a very difficult year for her because of her story. And I'm wondering if 7
I'm
is,
I'm tearing up.
yeah,
I'm getting emotional
yeah,
because I look at him and my husband and I have given our kids an amazing life so far,
yeah,
doing the best we can, and they're in great schools. We do a lot of one-on-one time with them. He has so much going on right now that's amazing.
yeah,
And when I look back to stepping into a house at his age, not having been to school, having been abused and beat up for 6 years at that point, and just where I was, it's emotional for me because it makes me understand at a real level how much I went through.
yeah,
And then I see him, and he's an amazing boy. On the one hand, I'm like, "Holy moly, it's so real for me being with him because that's a part that I've blocked out." But then I'm like, "Okay, well, thank God, I'm not perpetuating a cycle of
right.
alcoholism, drug abuse, and negativity from my own family." And I think sometimes this cycle of your background and your family, some people can never escape it. And I escaped it, and I worked really hard to escape
Yeah,
it. Yeah, I feel emotional, and I look at their sizes. I have a 3-year-old daughter and 6, and I'm like, "That was me going through this abuse," and it really nails it home for me. But life has gone on to be incredible, and I have no regrets with any of my background, and that I had to go through that. To me, at times, it's been a gift.
yeah.
It's really created desire to give back to the world, a desire to be a better mom to my family, to have a great business where I'm helping people a lot and enabling opportunities for people, and that all of that comes from my childhood. But you
And what your
mentioned
mom taught you. I mean,
yeah,
she,
my mom taught me
when you said that moms don't get credit all the time, I always say this about
yeah,
adoption. I am, for those of you who might be listening, wondering how I'm connected, I am a mom by adoption twice. And I always say that adoptive parents, we love these children all in before we even meet them. And in my cases, I was matched with birth mothers and they were pregnant with my 2 girls. In your case, it's a little different, but it really does
yeah,
sound like your mom, she was all in as you were going to that house. And
yeah,
you say in the book, correct me if I'm wrong, that she wasn't in your, like, geographical
she
area for the
wasn't, she was
foster assignment. Like, for some reason, your social worker went outside the scope. I mean, it's a mir but this
no,
is
it's
when you say
amazing.
fate. It was your social worker went outside the scope, found her, and you went there, and that is the moment. That's the one piece that, like, changed it all.
It definitely was. That was very unusual. They were very desperate to get us placed. It was a weekend, I remember. It was and my dad confirmed this with me recently. It was like a Friday, and they had to get us placed for the weekend, and so she was the only one available to take us immediately. And so that to me is an act of God.
Yeah,
And I remember I would always say I just knew that this wasn't supposed to be the way I was living. I knew there was something better. I had glimpses of it. So I feel like through my constant feeling and repetition of that in my mind, I helped to manifest her with
yeah. It's
God's
pretty
help.
incredible. Again, buy the art here on Amazon, guys. You're really going to want, I mean, this story is just tremendous. And I know we could keep talking on this subject matter. We're probably going to have to do a part 2 with you down the road,
That's
but
okay.
I want to shift gears.
Okay.
I'm going to cut out college and I'm going to cut out a
Okay.
little bit of your in between landing in Philadelphia and
Okay.
starting this art business because this moment, this to me was such a poignant moment. I even wrote this down on page 128. In the year you were in Philadelphia, you were representing artists trying to make money that way, and you were like not making ends meet. And all of a sudden, you realized a trend that you were seeing. And this is what I found to be so interesting about you. you noticed in the other cities you'd been in, New York and LA, that there were galleries dedicated to new and emerging young artists. And in Philadelphia, there was nothing. I'm
Yeah.
also from Philadelphia, everybody. So, like, it was a cool part for me to read. I know exactly where she's talking about in the neighborhood. That was your next aha moment that maybe you manifested. And so you started on that. And then the other part, I'm going to turn it over to you, but the other part that I loved was your taxi driver sale, which was one of your first sales. And tell us about this because that part, I don't know, you're in this book and all of a sudden you're like, is she really going to sell painting to this taxi driver? And sorry, guys, spoiler alert for the book, but that was kind of cool. You connected with him in such a special way. And
I did. And all right. So I have to say that Russ and Elaine, my adopted parents, were like, do not go into the arts. You're going to be a starving artist. You're going to be broke. You're going to be poor. And that was my calling. And I kept saying, there's nothing else I want to do. Like, I want to do this. And my mom kept urging me, just become a teacher, go into education. And then they're like, you like science, like go into biology, get into science. And I just kept saying, no, 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 I'm going into the arts. And I built a lot of great stuff in college. I had a lot of opportunities to work at Bucknell and be in the arts, and that really created a foundation for me. I worked in New York City, moved around. I talk about that, but I was always working in the arts, doing really interesting work that all kind of coalesced back in Philadelphia. I landed a gallery job with a startup gallery. That was a great experience for me because I essentially got to take all my skills and basically help the owners launch their gallery, and they didn't know how to do it because they had never done it before. But I, at 25, was kind of showing them the way through all my experience, and that was exciting. But then I realized I'm not going to get paid enough, and I'm going to keep on this path of not paying bills. I was making $10 an hour, so I pivoted. I started trying to do some art consulting, and I ended up setting up a gallery office in my apartment at 7th and Spruce Street. That was a few blocks from my now current gallery. And that was the start of the precursor to my gallery opening. But I was essentially helping artists with growing their careers. I was starting to do art consulting. I worked on the Capitol Grill restaurant in Philadelphia and was trying to go in that direction. I was in a cab and I had a portfolio of watercolors. And for me, I just love people. And if you're with me, I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about you. What are you doing? How did you do this? Why are you driving a cab? Like, and I sometimes it drives people around me crazy, but I want to know everyone's story and I want to know people. And I was chatting with the cab driver and he was telling me about him and his wife and he was from India and why he drives a cab and opportunities in America. And he's like, what about you? What are you doing? Where am I taking you? And I said, oh, I'm going to a framer in Old City. Oh, why are you going to a framer? Oh, I'm bringing these artworks. Oh, my wife and I collect art. We collect a couple pieces a year. And then he goes on to tell me, did you hear that famous story about the cab driver from New York who collected art with his paycheck and ended up selling it for millions of dollars? Actually, no, I'm not familiar with that story. So we talked about that. So he ends up saying, I said, can you wait? I'm going to drop this and then I'm going to come back to my office. Yes. Okay. So we're driving back and he said, "Do you have art I can see?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. And I have art in this portfolio." So he ends up looking at the art in the portfolio. And I remember it. It was watercolors by Philadelphia artists who did murals around Philadelphia. And he was like, I love these. And then he said, can I come see more of the art in your office? And I'm thinking, okay, this is getting a little dicey. I don't know
yeah,
this guy, cab driver, but my instinct says it's okay. Like I'm pretty good instinctually. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave the door open. Anyway, so he comes up, he looks at the art, he's like, I want to buy some of this art. Can you send me information? And so he buys a watercolor on the spot, tells me he has work that needs to be framed and that he and his wife want to pick out more art. That was really my first big sale. And that was a big deal for me. And then I realized This is going to be viable. I'm going to launch it. I've done so much. And I just started assessing everything I had done that point in the arts and the successes that I had created, really just to build my confidence to take the next step. And then I realized from that experience, if I'm going to do this, I can't have people coming up to a one bedroom walk up apartment. I really need to decide if I'm going to be serious. And that would be opening a physical gallery space. And that's when I made that pivot and started down that path.
It's just so good. So I'm sitting here. We just are never going to have enough time to do all of this. And I think we're going to have to leave, I don't know, maybe your motherhood story out for the next time because the way you developed this business and just hustled and learned, it's just so cool. Like you did everything the hard way almost in your teaching
Yeah.
yourself. I wrote down a couple things when I was reading the book, and I do remember your answer to me when we first met. So we'll see if you have the same one. What
Yeah.
has been the most exciting sale painting wise in your life? And not just the taxi driver is just the sweetest, most meaningful story, but the most exciting piece where you were like, oh my God, I'm here.
Okay. There are so many exciting stories that like my mind was just racing, like, things were popping into my head. People, artwork sold. An exciting one happened during COVID. It might be different. My
Yes,
original
because you and
answer
I met
here.
before COVID. You told
Okay.
me at the time we met, which I forget how long ago that was. It was at least 10 plus years that you sold a Kandinsky to a collector.
So yes, I've landed in blue chip art sales and I've worked with many colleagues to understand how to be in that market, including appraisal work. And it's not like I just had this painting and just sold it. There was a lot of background work to lay the foundation for me to have the skill sets to be in that level of marketplace. I recently, and I'll change some of the details to protect my clients. At
Of course.
COVID, I had a great sale where what was exciting for me was that, and I'll just be really honest with all of it, the art market is a very dirty, shady place often. It's called the Wild West. Different
So's the
markets.
world of adoption is called the
It
Wild
is. No,
West.
I
There
could
we
see
go.
that. Like,
I always say it's like the Wild West out there.
Wild West.
It's
The art
funny.
world's not regulated. My husband had a background in finance, heavily regulated. There are rules. You could lose your license. There's none of that in the art world. So you have
Same
people
with
that
adoption. There are a lot
take
of
advantage of
rules, and then
people.
there's not a lot of rules in
No,
adoption,
it's like the
and
Wild West.
people behave badly. It's very funny, this parallel.
Yes.
And I'm always amazed that people are still in business as adoption professionals when they are completely unethical and icky, to be polite.
I I met a client through another good client. A lot of my business comes from word of mouth and people just have a great experience and they pass on my names. I'm him and oh, call Bridgette. That happened with this case where someone had a painting to sell. It was a family heirloom. It was passed down generationally. They acquired it through a family member working for the artist who became very famous. And they had talked to a gallery in New York who had represented her estate. And they were told that, oh, we could sell this for you for $300,000. And smartly enough, they decided, let me just make sure that that number is accurate. So they asked my client, and I went to their place and just out of the gate, I just said, this painting is worth $2 million. And
Oh my God.
they didn't know that. And I then went out, we got them a formal appraisal report. We had the condition appraised. It was in perfect condition. And basically, I went on to sell it to them and came pretty close to realizing the sale price for them of $2 million.
That's incredible.
It was not about the money. It was more about doing the right thing in a moment where they were about to get raked over
That's
the
it.
coals.
It's excitement to have integrity in this world. And I
Yes.
talk about this every single day in my work and people I come across is that it's not always about the money. It's about
No.
saying, oh my God, I have a moral compass when 99% of the world does not, and I can help you. And I get how exciting that must have been,
Yeah.
and they
So
must have
that
been
was
so grateful to
amazing.
you.
Oh, they were.
Yeah, I mean,
And the
and
painting's now
shame on that
sitting.
other person
I
that
know.
said
No, but
300.
they and there was a whole backstory. The painting was privately put on the market without their knowledge, and essentially the person that did this burned the painting, like, to make it unsaleable. I didn't realize this until I was into my 3rd call with someone that collected a lot of this artist's work that had told me they had already seen it, and they should have
Mm,
never seen it because it was
interesting.
never on
Oh
the
my
market.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
So, the fun part about this story is I was going down the line, I had 50 people to share this painting with, and I sold it to the 50th person on the list. And so, there's this whole thing of perseverance too. I remember feeling really frustrated, and I was like, "I have to solve this problem because someone screwed up and burned their painting, and I'm going to get them what they deserve." And that to me is
Yeah.
my adopted mom. That was her
Yeah.
spirit. That was, like, fighting for what was right.
Exactly. So I find this story so interesting because I live in New York, and recently, a few months ago, there was a very famous Klimt painting that went at Sotheby's for well over their estimation, and it sold for $236 million for a painting.
Yep. Was it
And
owned by the Lauder family?
I think so. I think that's
Yeah.
exactly who it was,
Yep.
and I think it was so interesting because it was in the news, but, like, there must be so many interesting sales that happen below the radar screen, like what you
Oh,
just
yeah.
said, that
Yeah.
no one ever knows about, and that one, because it was Lauder and here in New York, it went to Sotheby's, his whole collection, but is there, like, a underground network where, no, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, off the beaten path where you guys all know about important sales that are happening, not at Sotheby's, and how does that all work? Because that's so interesting.
That
That
exists. I think when people have a collection like that collection, the Lauder collection and artworks at that caliber, having it go to a reputable auction house and put it in the limelight will maximize the potential value because then it tells the entire global world,
yeah, it's
"Hey,
international at that
you
point,
could
yeah.
have this if you want it, if you're willing to pay enough," and people do pay enough. But there's also situations like many of the ones I find myself in where a family might have inherited an important work of art, or I'm working on a sale right now. I'm about to get the work where the husband and wife rode motorcycles, and the artist was a motorcycle racer, and they traded motorcycles, motorcycle repair work for major paintings that are now worth over 200,000.
Oh my
And they'd
gosh.
never been seen before, and the artist gave them some of his best work ever made. So they've acquired this. So those situations and those paintings tend to be more below the radar
Yeah.
because you're going to typically maximize the value of what you can obtain in a private sale versus an auction sale.
Now see, if I was still an active publicist, I would, like, instantly wanna take you on as a client because these stories, they're fascinating, and they're
Yes.
meaningful. Like, it's so cool what you just said.
I'm working on another project I've been working on for 3 years, and it's been a very heavy, deep research project of what I'm calling a missing Monet. And
Mm.
it's a piece that was made in the 1700s in France,
Oh my
but
gosh.
and we're at the point where it's been validated through scientific and AI authentication. That's going to be really the next wave of what's going to hit the art world. It's coming to light this spring overseas
That's very cool.
at a European business art conference where they're going to be presenting it as a case study. So I've been working with colleagues in New York on the research, and I'm really excited about it. I'll have to come back on and tell you about that when
Yes.
that's done.
Yes. Because we have time for one last thing to talk about, and it's interesting, and I don't know whether I read things like this because I used to be a publicist or I am a storyteller or why, but in the conclusion of your book, the first line that you wrote in the conclusion is, "I've been scared for most of my life." And you stopped me dead in my tracks. And I'm like, that should have been the opening sentence of your
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Are you still scared?
Oh, for the most part, no. But I have found, my calling in life in multiple areas. I think a lot of people that they haven't found that yet. I'm really grateful I have. I am excited for the future. I'm always aware of, am I doing the best I can in my own life to be the role model that I want to be for my kids? Am I mirroring, like authentically mirroring my best person? Because they're looking at me every day and I'm with them every day. And so I wouldn't say it's fear, it's more of an awareness of, I know the line between screwing something up and thriving, and I've lived it. I think my biggest focus right now is on my children, but I also love my clients and helping them navigate what they're trying to do in their home office through arts and doing it in a responsible, ethical way that is positive. So the fear I once had, I have control of my life, my finances, like the things that, of course there's things that we can't control, but I just show up every day trying to be my best.
Well, it's pretty impressive. It's really pretty impressive. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, the book is called The Art Cure. You're going to thank me later. It is so good and so interesting. And yeah, I can't wait to see what's next for you, Bridgette. We will have you back on because we have to talk about having children. I mean, that's a big part of your life, and we're going to save that
Okay.
tidbit for the next time. But why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Great. My gallery website is bridgettemayergallery.com. If you're curious, my email's on that page under contact if you want to write me. And then we're on Instagram and it's at @bmayergallery. And those are the places to find me.
It's great. And I want to thank you. You've been so supportive since we met of helpusadopt.org's work. And I am grateful for all of that. And I hope we can work on something again in the near future.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm counting on it.
Yeah, it'll be pretty great. "30 Seconds with Becky Fawcett." So during my podcast with Bridgette, I talked about the first line that was in her conclusion to her book. And it said, "I've been scared for most of my life." And from my perspective, I think that would have made a great first line of her book. We've all been scared at some point. Some people are scared more often than others. If I were truly honest with you, I would tell you that I was terrified when I was going through IVF and it wasn't working. And I was terrified that I was going to have to adopt. I'm smiling right now and sort of laughing at that statement because look how my life turned out. My daughter Jane always says, "You were terrified, you didn't want to adopt. Look how that turned out for you, Mom." And it's true. I went through it. And then I was just terrified when Brooke's adoption took so long that I wasn't going to get the second chance. And now that I've lived through all of that, am I scared? No, I'm not really scared of much. I'm scared of letting the people that we serve down, the children that we serve down. I'm afraid I'm not going to be good enough tomorrow to raise enough money. But then, to be honest with you, I realize that that's not something to be afraid of. I just have to show up and do my best, put good work out there into the world, which we do every day at helpusadopt.org. So I am scared of nothing. I hope that you enjoyed the podcast. Talk to you soon. 30 Seconds with Becky Fawcett. So I want to thank you all for listening to the Fawcett Report today. And now I'm emotional because her story is so good. I'm so glad you were here. And all I can hope is that you see the world a little differently today and possibly use your voice to make a difference. You can follow the Fawcett Report on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can message me on Instagram or Facebook. and I will respond as long as you aren't mean, because you can disagree with me, but I don't do mean. Finally, if you are curious about my adoption, advocacy, and family building work through helpusadopt.org, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook as well as the website. See you next time.